Hello and welcome. My name is James Blake and I'm a business development analyst here at Synology UK. Now, as you may know, virtual machines are a key tool in an IT admin's arsenal, and as such, they require reliable and robust backup solutions to suit. So we're going to go over a couple of things in this video, and obviously we're going to start at what Synology solutions there are for your virtual machine backup. And then we're going to talk a bit about the deployment and restoration of your data. And then we're going to go over how you would switch to a second Synology, or if you are migrating to a new Synology. And then finally, we're also going to go over spec'ing out a system for your particular requirements. So I like to start with our software. So Active Backup for Business, which was launched as a beta back in 2016. And then in 2017, formally launched as well. Now, this was an agentless system. So in 2018, we launched a client to help provide better control over your backups. And then later on in 2018, we've also introduced support for Microsoft 365 and Google's G Suites. Now, 2019 was the year of our hypervisor integration. So in 2019, we've brought out support for VMware and Hyper-V, and then we also followed that up for SharePoint as well. Following that in 2020 was interaction with Virtual Machine Manager. So that's our own virtual machine environment. And that brings us to today, where we have over 2.6 million individual systems or accounts, all being backed up through just over 500,000 instances of Active Backup for Business. So what does the future hold for our software? Well, in 2021, we're also going to be bringing in Linux support as well. That's the software, but what about the hardware? Well, we have a huge range of devices, so ranging from 2-bay desktop units all the way up to full flash arrays. And as all of our products and our software is all designed in-house, we can make sure that it cohesively works together, so we can achieve a much more efficient system than when using products from multiple manufacturers. Now, what's more is that Synology was voted most reliable work server by PC Mag for 5 years in a row in 2020. Now, this means that we've got several big brands, or this rather means that several big brands have chosen Synology to handle their data and their virtual machine backup. And I'd just like to touch on Shiseido a little bit here as well. So what Shiseido have utilized is one of our features within Active Backup for Business, and that is global deduplication. Now, this is a cross-platform and cross-site, and it allows the data. So in this instance, they had 58 terabytes worth of data across all of their systems to all be reduced down to 28 terabytes in total. Well, what other options are there on the market? Well, here I've chosen for comparison, we've got our hugely popular RS1221 Plus and also 4 of our 12 terabyte hard drives. Now, this is looking to set you back around £2,200. And what that brings is 36 terabytes worth of usable on-site storage. Now, if you need to, you can then also expand this to have a secondary storage through our cloud or our C2 backup, and this gives you just for just over £50 a year, you can have a terabyte of extra storage. Now, this is also scalable, so you can range from 100 gigabytes all the way up to 200 terabytes. Now, comparing this to some of our competitors, well, as you can see here, brand A is also for around that £2,200. You don't get any on-site backup as they're a cloud backup only. But for that £2,200, you get about 1.25 terabytes worth of cloud storage. Now, brand B is a are more on-site focused. So again, for that £2,200, you're looking at about 1 terabyte of on-site storage. And then if you want to expand that, then you're going to have to look and pay about £1,000 a year, but then you do get unlimited cloud storage. Now, you might think that that is absolutely brilliant, but for some of our smaller partners who are utilizing Synology, they obviously don't have the budget to be spending £1,000 a year on that storage. So this is why it's really important to have that scalable storage as well. So we've looked at what Synology offers. Now let's actually go through and have a look at how we can do a deployment and restoration of our data. So first thing to do, we've got to set up our backup solution. And so this involves linking the Synology to the virtualization environment, and then we can set up a backup task to our Synology device. So here we are on VMware, and if we go back into DSM, and if we open up Active Backup for Business, we can see that we've got no virtual machine tasks running, backup tasks running. And what I'm just going to do is if I click on virtual machine and go into VMware, we can see that we've got no virtual machines showing up here. So first we need to open a link to the hypervisor. So we're just going to add one here, and I'm just remembered the IP address, so we'll put that in there, and just put in our login credentials as well. Ooh, always helpful if you can spell properly. And yes, we do want to trust this. And there we go. Now we can see that our hypervisor is online, and exiting out of that, we can now see that all of our virtual machines now show up, including this UK James virtual machine, which is the one we're going to be focusing on with our backup. Now that that's linked, we need to add a backup task. So if we go back into VMware tab, and if we select our virtual machine, we can then create a task. I just need to say where we want it to be stored. So we're going to Active Backup for Business. Make sure we can select here we can select all of the different virtual machines that we want. So we're just making sure that UK James is selected. And now we can set up a few more settings. So we can say the number of concurrent backups. But in this case, I'm just going to enable the application aware backup. Now, what this means is it allows us to do a snapshot of that virtual machine as is, as opposed to waiting for any tasks to finish. Now we can set up a schedule task. So we're just going to leave it in default. And then we're just setting up a custom retention policy. And then once we're happy with all of our settings, we can click apply. And yes, we do want to back up now. And now we can see that our virtual machine is backing up to our Synology. And there we go. It's as simple as that. Our virtual machine is now backed up, and we can continue to use it. So after the deployment, the most important thing is how we can restore our virtual machines in a smart manner to react to the corresponding cases. There's a couple of ways that we can do this. And so one way is to pick the file straight out of the restoration portal, allowing you to restore file by file. Now, I'm not actually going to showcase this today as we want to focus on full system restorations, but that option is there should you want to use it. Now, for a full system restoration, there are a couple of different ways. So there's either an instant restore. So this is when a virtual machine goes down. We can then mount the backup image through NFS, and then we can boot that virtual machine back up again on the production environment. And then once we're happy and we're ready to get everything back to the production site, we can then transfer that disk image using vMotion back to VMware. Now, when might you want to use this? Well, if you're wanting ultra-fast restoration, or if you have multiple large virtual machines that need to be restored all at the same time, getting those up and running as soon as possible is of utmost importance. Now, another method is full virtual machine restore. And this is where we're going to, when the virtual machine goes down, we can restore that whole disk image onto the production environment and boot up that virtual machine again. Now, when might you want to use this? Well, if you've got weak NFS throughput, or if there's a big difference between the virtual machine host and the Synology, you might want to do this. And also having that downtime allows you to perform some service or some maintenance on the virtual machines. So we're just going to go over how we would do that full virtual machine restore. So here we are on in a virtual machine that I've accidentally deleted a file from. Now, this is an important file that I'd like to get back, and unfortunately I've disabled the recycle bin as I was trying to minimize the amount of space taken up by this virtual machine. So what we're just going to do is, if we go back into the Synology, we can see that this is our virtual machine that we're wanting to restore. And if I go into here, we can make sure that this has got a backup, and it has been backed up rather. And now going back into the vSphere tab, we can click restore, and we just wanting to choose the platform we're wanting to restore to. So in this case, obviously VMware. And now in here in the portal, we can go through and check to make sure we're getting the right version that we want to restore from. So here we can see a couple of different versions that I've got set up. And if we choose one, we can go through all the different folders to see if we can find our files. So there we go, there's our important folder. And obviously as a portal, you could just take that folder right out of there. But of course we want to do the full VM restore. So we're just going to go back and we want to do that full virtual machine restore. And we're just going to choose the version that we want to restore from. So this one. Oh, no, this one. And click next. And then we can choose where we want to restore to. So we obviously want to restore to the original environment. And once we're happy with all of the settings, we can click apply. Yes, we do want to replace it. And now we can see that this virtual machine is restoring. Now, once it's restored, if we can go back into it, and we can see that the virtual machine has been disconnected. So go back onto the virtualization environment, and we can power on that virtual machine. And then we can go and obviously we can go and look into it. And once it's booted up, we should hopefully see our folder has been restored. So signing into Windows. We can now see that our folder marked important is there, and if I open it, we can see that our text file of information is also there. And there we go. There's our important information that Synology has been voted best work server for 5 years running, and also most reliable server for 5 years running as well. Now, as you might have seen, there was an option that was grayed out to restore the virtual machine to Synology Virtual Machine Manager. Now, if we are having backups of our virtual machine 2 here, we can back up to the Synology, and then we can, if that virtual machine were to go down, we can boot it up on the Synology to make sure we have that minimal downtime. Now we've got our virtual machine booted up on Virtual Machine Manager. How are we going to transfer it back to the production environment? Well, previously this used to be done with a user-intensive export and import process, but now we've introduced a new feature called Instant Restore Migration. Now what this does is it brings it to a near one-click solution to, obviously if we shut down our virtual machine, we can then restore that using a one-click solution back onto the production environment. Now, where is this feature located? Well, under Restore Status in Active Backup for Business, we have this new button, or Migrate Virtual Machine, and clicking that will allow that to migrate back. So here we are in Virtual Machine Manager, and we can see that our virtual machine has been powered off. And what we're just going to do is we're going to go into Active Backup for Business and click Migrate Virtual Machine, and we want to restore it to vSphere. So once we're happy with that, we're just going to click Next. And now we're just going to make sure that we've got the right environment and the right location in that environment of where we want to send it to. So now that that's done and we've clicked OK, we can just see that it's migrating over to that, or back to that environment. So we've gone over the deployment of our solution, and then we've also gone over restoration of our data. Now we're going to take a quick look at how we would switch over to a new Synology. So obviously we've got our PC, our server, our virtual machines, all backing up to Active Backup for Business. And then we've also got our active backup for Office 365 and G Suite, also backing up to our Synology. Well, we've got a couple of different options now that we can either back up our Synology to our C2 cloud, or we can do a snapshot replication onto a second Synology, which might either be offsite, or if we're wanting to do that migration to a new unit. So I've got a demo set up, and I'd just like to go over how the systems are arranged. So we've got .3.203 is our Synology, and that's linked to our vSphere environment, .3.6. And that is backing up onto our Synology with Active Backup as well. Now we've got our new Synology device, and what we're just going to do is we're going to have a snapshot replication onto our second Synology to make sure we've got all of our backups on there. And then if the Synology were to go down, we can then relink our new Synology to our virtualization environment, and then we can also set up, restart those backup tasks to that second Synology. So I've already set up the snapshot replication, and I'm just going to go over the switchover. That's the more exciting part of this. So what I'm just showing here is that on our second Synology, we've got Active Backup for Business running, but it has no tasks. And if we open up the shared folders, we can see that we've got our replication task set up here as a read-only folder, meaning that we can't write to it, as this is our folder that's been replicated across by our first Synology. So going on to our first Synology, we can see our backup tasks, and if we open up snapshot replication, and we can see that our snapshot replication has been successful. Now in the recovery tab, we can see our replication task, and we also can see our different couple of options. So we've got switchover, failover, which is grayed out. This becomes available when something does fail, and then we've got test failover as well. Now we're just going to choose switch over here. So we're just going to make sure that we've got all the right settings. So we're making sure we've got the right folder from and the right folder on our new Synology. And then once we're happy, we can click switch over. And now we can wait for that switch over to happen. So now that that switchover has happened and is successful, we can go back into our shared folders, and now we can see that the read-only folder is now on our first Synology. And if we go onto the second Synology and we give this a quick refresh, we can see that the active backup for business -1 is now available to write to from our second Synology. So now that we've got our switchover onto our second Synology, what we need to do now is we need to relink our second Synology to our production environment. So what we're going to do now is, if we see here, we don't have any of those backup tasks running on our second Synology. However, when we go into storage, what we need to do is we need to select relink. And yeah, we're just going to make sure that this is our folder that we want relinking, and click relink. Yep, okay, we know that we need to re-put our credentials in. And once we're happy with that, we're just going to click OK. And now we can see that we have our link set up. However, none of our virtual machines will show up as we haven't re-input our credentials. So going into manage, we can just click edit, and if we click apply, oh, I've just got the password wrong, I think. So let me just re-input the password. And once that's done, we can click apply. We can now see that this is online, and exiting out of this, we can see that all of our virtual machines are now back. So now that we've got that done, we've got our relinked, we now need to make sure that we've got our backup task set up. So we're just going to go into task, select our backup task, and then we're going to click backup. And now we can see that it's backing up. So once that's done, we now know that our backup is, we've switched over to our new Synology. We've then relinked our second Synology to our production environment. And now we have our second Synology backing up our virtual machines. So we've done that switch over to the new Synology. Now let's go over how we would spec out a system for your backup application. So we've gone over how how we'd switch over onto a new Synology. Now let's go over how we would spec out a system for your specific application and your backups. Now, there's a couple of different things we need to think about when speccing out a system. So that's obviously the number of virtual machines, the size of those virtual machines, the change rate. So that's how much changes in between each backup. The retention policy. So that's how often or rather how long we keep those backups for. And then also the deduplication rate as well. So that is how much can be condensed, and obviously taking out any data that stays the same throughout multiple backups. So I'm going to go over speccing out a system for VDS. Now, these are people that we've worked, these are some of our customers that we've worked with before. and they already use Synology to host their virtual machines, so we can pretty accurately spec out a system for them. Now, if you haven't heard of them, VDS are a B2B IT specialist, and they provide IT services, hardware, networking, cloud solutions, and also telephone exchanges. And in their virtual machine setup, they have around 220 virtual machines, each quite large. They're in that half a terabyte in size, and they change by about 2%. So yeah, let's run through spec'ing out a solution. So here we're choosing VDS. Now, VDS are a B2B IT specialist, and they provide services, IT services, hardware, networking, cloud solutions, and telephone exchanges. And they already use Synology to host their virtual machines, so we can pretty accurately spec out a backup system for them. Now, they have around 220 virtual machines, each of which are quite large. They're in about half a terabyte in size. And they have a couple of other factors. So obviously the change rate for these guys is about 2% each day. And we're also going to use a pretty typical retention policy. So that's backup every hour for a day. And then every day for a month, and then every month for a year, and then also a yearly backup as well. Now, if I put all of this data into our backup sizing tool, what I need to do first is obviously we're backing up 0 physical PCs, so we're solely focusing on the virtual machines. I can put that 220 virtual machines in there, each of those being that 500 gigabytes. And obviously we don't have any physical servers either, so we can skip that. And here we can see that we've got 107.4 terabytes in total. Now, obviously, as I said, we've got that 2% change rate each time. And we're just going to put in that retention policy as well. So 24 hourly backups, 30 daily backups, so one a month, one every day for a month, and then 12 monthly backups, so every month for a year, and then also 1 annual backup as well. Now, lastly, we have that deduplication rate. So for these guys, we're putting in about 60%, and this gives us a total of 102.3 terabytes after 3 years. Now, if you look at some of the units at the bottom, these are some of our extremely popular units. So I've put in the DS218 Plus and the DS718 Plus as a bit of sort of reference. Obviously, we probably wouldn't go with one of those units, as they would be very much pushed to their limit here. Now, if we look at it, we've actually got the RS3621XS Plus, the RS4017XS Plus, and the SA3600. Now, for this particular use, we might actually prefer to go with the RS3621XS Plus, as it's will do the job, and will also have that. It will be slightly lighter on the wallet than going for a full fat SA3600. So for these guys, VDS will go with that RS3621XS Plus. Now, UNESCO is another one of our customers, and they already use Synology to back up their virtual machines. So we can get obviously their virtual machines are spread across 70 offices worldwide. Yeah, we have a pretty accurate picture of their virtual machine setup. So we know that they have 420 virtual machines, each of them being about half a terabyte in size as well. Now, they've also got that same 2% change rate, and they also have a very similar retention policy as well. So back into our sizing tool, if we've still got no PCs, physical PCs, but we can up that number to 420 virtual machines. And they still have 0 physical servers. Obviously, sorry, the virtual machines are still half a terabyte in size, with 0 physical servers, so we can skip that. That same 2% change rate. Now we're also keeping that same retention policy, so 24 hourly backups, 30 daily backups, 12 monthly backups, and then also that 1 annual backup as well. Now we're also going to keep that same 60% deduplication rate, as we feel that that's a pretty good fit for these guys. And now looking at the bottom, back down to our units, we can see that quite clearly our desktop units are not going to cut it here. And we can also see that the RS3621XS Plus is getting pushed quite a lot as well. So in this case, we would suggest the SA3600, as it will be able to cope with all of those virtual machines being backed up at the same time. So for UNESCO, we'll go with that SA3600. That's how we'll go over spec'ing out a system for your particular use case. And there's a couple of points that I'd just like to take away from this. So we have that Synology has that powerful backup software, allowing control over the backup tasks, as well as control over the restoration of your data. Now, our software is also, as shown a bit earlier, it is growing in maturity, and we have that support for 2 major virtualization environments, and of course, all with no licenses. We can then, we've also gone over how we can adhere to the 3-2-1 rule of data backup. So having your on-site and off-site backups for your data through a second Synology, which allows that easy failover to take place should one of them go down. And then lastly, we've also gone through how to pick the right Synology device for your application as well. So yeah, thank you all very much for watching.